Hello friends, so welcome to this lecture on authentication and authorization in Azure App Service. So before digging into this concept, we need to understand or try to have these few basic checks like you may note it down. Like the first one is always disable the anonymous access onto your web applications unless and until there is a specific need or you need to support anonymous access request. If it is not required, disable that. The next one is you are developing your Azure web apps, mobile applications, and in order to do that, you will be using different platforms, protocols, frameworks, programming languages like .NET, Core, Java, Python, Ruby. We have already discussed in the uh, previous lectures. So make sure that okay, all these things which you are using, they are up to date because there are certain vulnerabilities or bugs are included with the earlier version. So make sure whatever versions, frameworks, protocols you're using, they're up to date. Now we'll come to the identity and access management part, wherein we'll talk about the authentication and authorization in app service. So Azure App Service provides a built-in authentication and authorization support, a kind of a module. We'll discuss that in a moment, with the help of which your users can sign in, access data by writing or minimal code in your web or RESTful APIs, or in case of mobile backs or your mobile backend or your Azure functions. See, one thing we need to understand, in order to require that authentication, there are two ways. Either the developers can write code or they can use this particular module to handle the authentication. So the in order to the problem is, if you'll think from that perspective, this particular feature Azure is providing us, you know, which we can use by writing and we can use it with simplicity by do not writing any kind of complex code. So, in short, just think from that perspective. Okay, you need to get your apps and mobile apps, web apps, all these, you need to get those authenticated. So if you need to write your own code or your developer, which they are working to prepare this authentication and authorization code or module, they need to have a deep understanding of security, how the federation work, encryptions, token works, how these grants are exchanged or the tokens are exchanged. Only then they'll be able to develop this kind of code so that all the federated entities can be used and different integrations, how the token exchange happens. So it's pretty complex thing. So best would be to use the authentication and authorization module provided by the Azure only. And you can, you can, or as a customer, you can focus that how you can deliver actual value to your customers. So this authentication and authorization module basically handles the web request before handing them off to your web application code. So it's like sitting at the front end and denies the unauthorized request before they reach your code. So we'll see that particular diagram in the Microsoft as well, and you can go through the documentation of Microsoft to understand more on this. So I'll give you that how it actually looks like. If you'll see in this diagram, this is like your client browser. This is the app service front end. So this is the code which I'm talking about, authentication and authorization, uh, basically module, which sits in front of your application and does the all the authentication and authorization. So you need not to write any kind of code, to really do that. So it's a, easy auth DLL, which basically handles all this. And, sits in the same sandbox in which your application code exists, and customer can do minor changes within these environment variables only. So this is the module which I'm talking about, basically handles the request from the browser, native apps, or any external service or any IDP. So this is the web app code. And this is where you can think of, like, in order to use these IDP to get those kind of request authenticated, one needs to have a deep understanding of the security and how this token exchange and IDP works. So that is why it is better to use the Microsoft provided authentication and authorization module. So let's move back to our lecture where we were discussing about the this code. So authentication and authorization module, like we seen in the diagram, handles the web request before handing them to your application code and denies in case the request is not authenticated. So what does that module handle? So it can authenticate users with the specific provider. It can validate, store, and refresh tokens and manage the authenticated sessions which are maintained to your application, injects identity information into the request address. So all these functions are basically done by your authentication and authorization module. So this is it. In this lecture, we discussed about few basic checks like try to use the updated frameworks, languages with the to build your which are used to build your web applications, and then if wherever possible or in most cases try to disable the anonymous access, and then the authentication and authorization module which we use to get our Azure web apps authentication, get the authentication done. So this is it, friends, in this lecture. Thank you for watching this lecture. Meet you in the next lecture. Thank you.